today we're going to do some grooving in Metasounds, and kind of just an overview of everything that's going to happen is we're going to do just like the tiniest smidge of drum theory, like a very small get your foot in the door drum set theory. And then we're going to take that theory into some Metasounds and create our own kind of semi-procedural drum set that you can add to whatever you want, any kind of song. And then we'll go into the actual blueprints and connect that Metasound to a few things within the game scene in true Implementournament fashion, so that you can make just your game scenes just a little more funky. All right. Yeah, looks like we got some folks in here. We can just dive right in. All right, so the whole kind of concept of this game, I guess I'll kind of go back to me first. So my name's Jared. I'm a composer, sound designer, based in Austin, Texas, from Canada originally. And I'm the technical audio designer here at Panic Button Games, where I get to try just fun technical stuff all day. And this talk kind of came from a project that I did. I have a YouTube channel where I just post small like implementation fun projects. So like a scene where I'm implementing spells in different ways that are, through Metasounds, Wise, FMod, all that kind of good stuff. This talk came from a scene that I did where I created a drum set in a room, kind of like a dingy practice room with a bunch of other instruments. And I created a Metasound that had a drum groove going, and different elements of that drum groove were connected to different things within the scene, and just caused a lot of fun shenanigans. So first thing I want to do is just kind of start by showing a little clip of that so you can kind of see what you're getting yourself into. And then we will kind of reverse engineer, rebuild that from scratch, and use it in a couple of new ways. My hope is that you'll take this concept of this drum beat and implementation through Metasounds, and having the scene react to stuff that happens in the Metasound, and Metasounds react to stuff that's happening in the scene, and apply it to stuff maybe other than drums. You can take these concepts and just use them for whatever, and hopefully they'll nicely translate. My YouTube channel is just my name and then audio. So Jared Farney Audio. All right, so this is a little clip from that. I'm going to share my screen. Share audio. Beautiful. Got it. Hide. All right, so this is just going to show you a little bit of the demo of the scene. While I'm thinking about it, there is a pinned comment on the top where you can leave any questions that you have, and I'll try to answer it throughout and then more at the end. All right, so you can kind of get the point there. It goes on for probably a lot longer than it should after that, where it just is, everything's exploding based on input within that Metasound. The drums that were happening are going to do what we're about to do, which is follow a kind of strict set of rules and guidelines to make it sound like a drum beat, while also adding in a lot of improvisation on the snare and bass to kind of add additional comping and just little elements to make it so it's constantly a different drum beat and never the same. And then, it's using that Metasound output to drive things like impulses on the cymbals, causing everything to explode. It's changing the lights in the scene whenever there's a big crash. It's doing a little camera shake every time at the start of every 4 measures. So we're going to recreate something similar to that. But first, we're going to do a little bit of drum theory, just the tiniest bits, so don't get scared. All right, so drums, just like most other kinds of music, exists on the staff. But we do it a little different than, say, like piano or guitar or something. We have like this little bottom spot here. That might be, you know, on piano, could be like an F, but on drums, we just have that bottom space is our bass drum, which is the one we play with our foot, the big boom. And then we add our stem from that. Most of the time on drums, we do the stems up instead of down. And then if I do the 3rd space up, the C space, if you're coming at it from piano, that is going to be our snare drum. Bop, the big whip crack sound, boom, kind of thing. It's going to be a lot of beatboxing going on. All right, and then the 3rd element that we need for this drum beat is going to be a cymbal. So cymbals are giant metal discs that we kind of play a constant groove on usually. And for cymbals, it's going to look kind of the same. We have our stem, but instead of the regular note head, you have an X. And so if you see an X of any kind on drums, that's going to be either like the hi-hat cymbals, the crash cymbal, the ride cymbals. Sometimes people do that for rims as well, which is kind of going to function the same in some cases here. All right, so with these 3, we can create a drum beat. And then if we wanted to, you could create a drum beat by doing something like this, where I have like a hi-hat and a bass at the same time. And then we just connect it together. And now instead of ting, boom, we have. All right, so that's going to be just kind of how we're creating our drum beats. All right, so the whole kind of crux of this talk is that I've been teaching drums for the last 20 years or so, kind of just since like middle of university. And then over the last 10 years before I got this job at Panic Button, I was teaching private lessons, about 60 students a week. And pretty much just, yeah, a lot of students, taught hundreds of students how to play drums kind of from scratch. And this was kind of the main method that came out of that, to get them playing drum beats really quickly along with songs. And we're going to use that now and hijack it to make cool Metasounds. All right, so this is going to follow 3 drum rules. I'm using the term rules extremely loosely because you can change it up and it'll still sound cool. In fact, a lot of times we do change it up. But if you follow these 3 rules, you should theoretically be able to play this drum beat along to like anything on the radio or any kind of like pop rock song. All right, so the first rule is we're going to take our hi-hat or any cymbal really. I'm using hi-hat in this case because that's kind of our most common one. And we're just going to play a steady rhythm on that. And in this case, we're going to make it 1/8 notes. So 2 every beat. I'm going to connect them, ting, ting. We have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. All right, so drum rule 1, keep something steady. This could be the hi-hat crash ride. This could be a rim. If you don't want to use like drums, this could also be things like a chest pat or like a slap, some kind of like higher pitch, like works really well. I'm working on a game right now called Chipwits, which is like a revamp of a game from the 80s that came out on like the Commodore 64 and Apple II. And in that, all of the percussion is done because you basically play as an engineer that's programming a robot. So all the percussion comes from like keyboard. And so the hi-hat notes are all keyboard clicks, like of the kind of sounds. And so you can use all kinds of different things. I've also used like piccolo flutes to kind of play this purpose, which is always fun when you write other instruments to play like drums. All right, the second rule we're going to have is going to be to put a big old bass drum on beat 1. So this is a pretty important thing on drums a lot of times, is to have just a big boom right at the start. A lot of times I've played in bands where they really rely on that as like a way to know where they are within a measure. to the point where you can like really throw things off if you leave it off. Like if you're like, they're like, what's happening? So you can kind of change that rule to make things feel a lot more nebulous. But if we want it to feel good and solid, we can keep it just right on 1. All right, the third rule that we're going to do is a big snare drum backbeat on beats 2 and beats 4. So we have our 1, our 2, our 3, our 4. Nice. All right, so looks like a drummer wrote that. All right, so we have bass drum on 1, snare drum on 2 and 4, which is the backbeat, which is the thing that people will, you know, clap along to 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so if I have these 3 things, I should basically be able to add pretty much whatever I want, and it should sound pretty solid. All right, so for example, if I wanted to, I could add a bass drum like in between here, maybe a snare drum in between here, maybe a bass drum here, another one here. I'm just gonna go kind of crazy with it. A snare drum here and a snare drum here. All right, so I've added a bajillion things to this now, and it is infinitely more complicated. But underneath it all, it's still just boom. But now with everything, boom. About as good of a beatbox as we're going to get right now. It is noon over here. All right, so underneath it all, drum rules are there. The red notes are our extra notes to kind of add some complexity and interest. And a lot of times drummers will improvise a lot of those inner notes. If you play them a little bit softer than the 3 rules, you can have it really stand out and sound unique. All right, so to the Metasound side, that's it for our drum theory for now. To the Metasound side, we're going to take what we just did there and put it into Metasounds, with the notes that are in black being our programmed notes that are always going to happen that way. I am going to add some variety on the hi-hat to make it a little bit interesting, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then the red notes are going to be the notes that we're going to have randomly in there. So I want to make it so a bass drum can randomly be on any of these 16th notes, except for the first big bass, because I don't want to add 2 at the same time and do some weird phasing issues or anything like that. And then I'm going to do same with snare, where it can do any of these 16th notes except for beat 2 and beat 4. And that's what we're going to do in Metasounds. All right, let's jump over to that. Everyone with me so far? I didn't beatbox too much or too little. That's also an option. Could have beatboxed too few notes. All right, so I am in just a blank first-person shooter template level here, scene in Unreal Engine 5. Right now, if I go in here, got a little bit of sneak peek. I'm actually gonna, why is it doing that? Why are you doing that? Anyways, I'm gonna just disconnect that. This was the example that I made. You can get a little glimpse here of what it'll look like, but I don't want you to see, don't look too much. All right, that was my practice run. All right, so we're gonna create a Metasound here, and it's gonna work like this. So I'm in just this basic first-person template. This is what you get if you just open up Unreal Engine and then say new scene, and then choose their first-person template with the blueprint option, which is all we need for this. It does have some starter content with it, but we're only going to use whatever is kind of here already. You can see I can like shoot these balls at these cubes. That's all we have, and that's what we're going to use right now. All right, so I'm going to go into my content drawer, and I'm going to go to my audio spot, and I'm going to create a new Metasound source. We're going to name it Cool Drums. All right, beautiful. And then pop that up here. All right, so I have this blank Metasound, which is where we're going to start. And from here, I'm going to put in all of the logic for the entire drum beat, the hi-hat, the bass on 1, the snare on 2 and 4, and then the 2 improvised ones, the bass drum that can be any 16th note except for 1, and the snare that can be any 16th note except for 2 and 4. All right, so you can see here right now, this is a mono Metasound, which works great for this talk because I think I'm only in mono anyways. But if you wanted to change that, you would go Metasound, and then you can change it here. Now I've got 2 outputs. But again, I'm just going to be mono for this. And then you see this output unfinished. It's giving me a big warning. And that is the thing you connect when you want the Metasound to end, because Metasounds by default don't really know what kind of audio you're playing or anything like that. It just kind of knows that it's like a container for all of the stuff, because you can have things being triggered from other things, and you can have, you know, big silences within things being triggered, and you want it to like pick up from certain spots. And so you kind of need to explicitly tell it when to stop a lot of times here. And that's what this does. But for this is going to be a looping drum beat that we would theoretically stop in code somewhere. And so I'm going to get rid of that. You can just get rid of it right here, ka-chunk. And now we just have an input and an output. Nice. All right, so first thing we're going to do is get the hi-hats going. For this, all I have asset-wise is I just have a couple of different things. I've got my backbeat snare, my bass drum that's going to be used for the 16th notes, a big bass drum for beat 1, and then I've got 3 different hi-hats that we'll talk about here, and then a snare for my improv. All right, so the 3 different hi-hats I have an accented one, a tapped one, which is like the soft, and then an open one. And so we can kind of create little side melodies within our drum beat by using that hi-hat in different ways. So like accents in different spots. So instead of like, we want some variety, so it could be like a. All right. And so I'm going to create an array variable to pick kind of randomly between these, but I'm not going to make it fully random because I want the taps to be the main thing. But we're going to pick through those. So to do that, I'm going to go to variables. I'm going to name it hi-hat array. All right, I don't want this to be a float type, but instead I want it to be a wave asset type. And then you can see there's a little box here that says is array. And if I check that, now I've got this little elements that I can add. I'm going to select all 3 of my hi-hats. And when I start to drag it, you can see it lights up. Realize I just pointed at my screen. You can't see my finger. It lights up right here with this little blue outline that I can just drop them all in there. And now I've got all 3 hi-hats in an array. And I can just pull that into my Metasound and drop it. Now I've got this array. And I want to randomly get those. So I want to pick a random one basically every time. So right now, if I connect this, I'm going to press play, and it's going to randomly pick one of these, which is a nice kind of way to get things going, but it's not doing anything else quite yet. All right, so the next thing I can do is I need it to actually play that now. And to do that, I'm just going to use a wave player mono. All right, so when it picks one, I want it to play one, and the thing I want it to play is the array that I just picked. All right, now if I wanted to, I could select out, connect it to this out, and now we'll actually have some sound. You can hear I had one beautiful hi-hat. If I stop it and start again, another one. There's the open one. And it should just kind of randomly be cycling through those. You can see when I press play, it does it once, but this timer keeps going. And that's because I removed that little one-shot finish thing. And so this will just keep going forever, which has definitely gotten me in trouble before. The very first game that I did anything with Metasounds on, I did not connect the unfinished to anything, and it was for like a gunshot sound or something like that. And it was every time it was shooting a gunshot, it was spawning a new sound. And then we very quickly had like hundreds of sounds playing at the same time. And when I did the audio profiling, I was like, oh, this is not what I intended. So you can definitely get into some issues if you don't connect things to stop. All right, cool. So what I want now is I want to make it so that it's picking the tap note more than the other ones. And so to do that, I'm going to use this weights here. Another way that you can create variables is just by dragging off this way and then saying make a little graph variable. I'll just call that hi-hat percentage. All right, so we have an array here. If you remember, we had 3 elements in our array. 0 was accent, 1 was the open, and 2 was tap. So I'm going to create 3 here as well. And I want tap to happen like 70% of the time. I want the accent to happen like 20% of the time. And maybe 10% of the time we'll do the open sound. All right, so now if I do it again, you can hear we've got these different kind of sounds happening. All right, now you can probably hear I was just spamming the mouse on that. And so that's not how we want to do it. We want to actually set it up to repeat on its own. We're going to do that with the trigger repeat. I'm going to disconnect this by pressing Alt and clicking. Move this guy up here. So now I want to press play. It's going to repeat this, and every repeat it's going to get a new one of these. Right now the period's 0.2. Nice. Sounds like a groovy little hi-hat. All right, it's going really fast, and right now it's not to any kind of beat, but luckily we have this BPM to seconds node that they've included. And so if I connect the seconds here to the period, I can create another variable, which is just going to be my BPM variable. And I'm creating this as a variable because I want all of the elements of this to be lined up to the same BPM to make it so that I can just change this one variable here and it'll change every element instead of having to go to each one and saying like 120, for example. All right, now I change that to 120. So if I play it, we have 120 beats per minute. It's triggering that every time. All right. But if you remember on the whiteboard thing, I said that this was going to be an 1/8 notes going to every beat, which means I need to change this beat multiplier to 0.5. So it's got 4 beats and it's going to trigger every half of a beat. So 8 notes. Beautiful. All right. Now we have this beautiful hi-hat spot. Let's see how many times I call drums beautiful today. They are beautiful instrument. All right, so I purposely messed this up to show that if you just highlight it all and press Q, hey, it starts to move everything together again, and then you can kind of mix and match it. I like to keep things as tidy as possible because Metasounds and blueprints in general can start to get really crazy really quickly. All right, then we can highlight it all and press C to make a little comment. Hi-hat on 1/8 notes. All right, the rest of them are going to go a lot faster, I promise. All right, so now we're just going to do the kick on 1. I'm just going to copy all of this, paste it. Now that I have the logic kind of set up to play an audio file, randomly get one if I had multiple, repeat that and repeat that on the beat. Now I can use that logic for everything else nice and quick. All right, so for the bass drum, this is the bass drum on 1. I don't want that to be a random one from an array, so I'm just going to get rid of this because it's going to be one specific asset, which I can find by just selecting this and finding the thing. Or you can go back to here and find my big bass and do the same thing where I drag it, drop it on, and now we got that there. All right, so I'm going to connect it like this. All right, so we have a big bass doing the exact same thing, but if I try to connect it to the output, it removes this output. And that's because we can only have one going to this full main output, and we need a mixer. And I'm just doing mono, so I'm going to use a mono mixer. I know that I'm going to need 5 because I've done this before. But a lot of times I will underestimate or overestimate and then have to go back later and be like, okay, this is the actual number. All right, so I'm going to connect that into index 0 and this into 1. You can see they each have their own gain. So I can make, say, like the bass drum a little louder, 1.2, and maybe make the hi-hat a little bit softer, 0.8. All right, now if I play it, it's going to sound interesting because right now the kick is going to be doing eighth notes. Got like a pseudo groovy thing here. If I change that to 1, it's going to do quarter notes, and then we'll get a little club beat. All right, but really, we want this to be on the whole note, which in music, quarter note's 1, half note would be 2, whole note would be 4. The other way, eighth note would be 0.5, and 16th note would be 0.25. I don't know what that is in quavers. I'm not quaver fluent, unfortunately. All right, so I want this to be on 4 for whole note. I'm going to comment that bass on bass on 1. All right, now if I want it to be extra fun, I could change the colors of these so I can really get to them. Let's say hi-hat looks like it would be more of like a yellowish to me. I don't have synesthesia, but I'm assuming something like that. Bass drums maybe a little red. It's like the oomph. All right, so now it sounds like this. Beautiful. All right, now another beautiful. I'm unstoppable. All right, so I'm going to copy this, paste this, and now we're going to do the same with the snare. This one's going to go even faster. I'll try to keep it zoomed in so it doesn't look crazy small. I realize it's like this, which if you're looking on a phone, you're like, all right, so if we have this here, I've copied my bass drum. I want my backbeat snare. Drag that in there. Right now, if I do that, it's going to be doing the same thing. All right, and we said we wanted this one to be going on 2 and 4, which is half notes. So I could set that to 2. But if I just do that, it's going to be doing beats 1 and 3, which is not very hip unless we're doing it on purpose. All right, so to make it not do that, after the on play here, I'm going to add a trigger delay. Swap that because I want to delay it by 1 beat. And so I'm just going to copy this, paste this. I want to delay it by 1 quarter note. So it's going to go, if I follow the flow, I'm going to press play. This is going to trigger. It's going to go into the delay, which is going to go delay time. It's going to trigger it by 1 beat. And that beat is at 120 beats per minute. And then after that 1 beat changes, you'll see that it's going to have a little red thing go to trigger repeat, where it's going to start doing it every 2 beats at 120. So it should make it on 2 and 4. Snare would be blue. It's cool. All right, nice. Awesome. So that is the end of the first part of this drum beat, which is our kind of non-randomized things. This is our drum rules. If I play this with like any song, it should line up pretty well. H-O-T, you can have it line up with any kind of groovy song. All right, nice. So now we're going to get interesting with the fun stuff. All right, I'm going to do the kick on every 16th note. And this is where it's going to get, cool, and why Metasounds are super fun to mess around with. I'm just going to connect it right away here. Ba-bum. Move these guys just a little bit out of the way here. If you wanted to really get extra with it, you could add these little reroute nodes and try to get everything straight. You just double click on it, you can get all these little reroute nodes. I'm not going to be that extra right now, but you could. All right, so I copied the kick logic, but for this, we wanted it to be every 16th note possible. And I'm going to change that bass drum asset to not be the big bass, but be the improv bass. All right, so right now, if I play this, it's going to do every 16th note, no matter what. Which instantly changed my face to the metal rock out double kick sound. All right, but I want to make it so that it's doing any 16th note except for 1. And so to do that, I'm going to create a couple of trigger sequences. Sequence, 1 second. All right, so I've got a sequence of 8 and a sequence of 2, mainly because they don't have a sequence of 16. And if they do, I don't know how to do that. And so what I'm going to do is basically a trigger sequence works like this. If I connect it in, it's going to go every time I press play. It's connected to both at the moment, but you can see it's doing this through like that. And that's going to go through each one. So it's going to go 1 E and 2 E and it's going to just go through all of them here. And remember, this is, I said trigger sequence 8, but it starts with 0 and goes to 7 because it's doing the nice programmer start from 0, not 1. So don't let that throw you off. All right, so I want this to pick every single one, go through, except for the very first one. And so I'm going to do a trigger any, because if I wanted to say, for example, like plug that into there, but then also plug this, I want either of these to work, it'll replace it just like before. And so what we do to get around that is I connect one to here, and now I can connect any of these I want, like this. And now, and any of these trigger, it's going to make it all the way through and it's going to play the thing. I'm going to remove the kick on one just so you can hear what it sounds like, the improv. All right, so right now it should make it so that it's doing every single one of these that's connected, but it's going to skip 0, which right now, since it's only 8, it's going to go 1, nothing, and it's going to go E and 2 E and then 3 is going to be nothing as well because I don't have anything here. So it's going to sound like this. Nice. All right, so that's almost there. We have one more step, which is I want it to not play on 1, but I do want it to be able to play on 3. So I'm going to connect this in here, and on the very first time it makes it to 0, I want it to do nothing, so I'm going to connect that to nothing, and then I'm going to connect that one to this. And now, when it loops all the way around the second time, it should play the bass. So this should be a bass on everything except for 1. Beautiful. All right, now we have one more little thing. I'm trying to make it a meme for how many times I can say beautiful. Be the beautiful drum guy. Yeah. All right, so we wanted to do one more thing after making it through this because I don't want it to play every single time. That might be a little chaotic. But we can add in a trigger filter to make it so that whenever it goes through this, which is everything except 1, it's going to have a random chance to do heads or tails. At the moment, it's set to 1, which means it's always going to be heads. 0 would always be tails. And so I probably want it at, 0.5. I'll say it's going to happen exactly half the time theoretically. And say when it's heads, it's going to play that. All right, so now it should be a lot more random. All right, sounds cool. All right, now I'm going to put this bass back on 1 so we can hear the big predictable boom so that we don't mess with anybody's brains. All right, so I'm going to play 3, 2, 1, hear it. Don't. Nice. See, we've already got some nice, beautiful memes going on in the chat. All right. So this is our bass improv, not on 1. I made the bass red. We'll make this like a kind of maybe deeper red. All right. And now we're going to do the same with the snare. I can copy this logic because I'm going to use a lot of the sameness of it, but I need to change just one little thing, which is instead of not wanting it on 1, I want it to not be on 2 and 4. And so to do that, I'm just going to use a different sequence, which is going to be a sequence 4 going out and think an NE4 as well. All right, again, I need to change the assets so it's not just random basses. Need to connect it to the mixer, the final piece. All right, so right now, if I play this, it's gonna do kind of random things again because it's connected weird. All right, so now I'm gonna add that, what was it again? Oh yeah, a sequence of 2 for the first one. But like last time we had the first time I didn't want it to play and then I wanted the second one to. This one I want the first one to play, but not the second one. So it's gonna go through 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and so that should theoretically work. All right, it's going, it's doing as I have forced it to do. All right, let's line this up a little bit, comment it. Snare, improv, not on 2 and 4. And then that snare was blue. I'll make this keeping consistent, a slightly darker blue. All right. One thing that I've kind of noticed with it is this improvised snare is pretty loud and intense. So I'm going to make this a lot softer and maybe even add something like a little low pass filter to kind of make it a little more chill. And so low pass filter, I'd connect there, swap it here, and maybe do, let's see what it sounds like if I cut off like a lot. A little bit too much. All right, so now you could just play with that forever, and it's already just going to keep grooving. If we wanted to, you could add something like Bit Crusher or something just at the very end here. Can mess it around with it. If I drag off this, instead of creating a normal variable, if you create a graph input, I can now change this in real time. And this is a parameter that you can use like in the game. Like say I do something, I can change this value based on something in the game. Nice. All right. Fun times. All right, let's do a couple of things that we can change in the game scene. Because I want to really quickly make it so you can actually see how you can use this so it's not just a random drum beat that you're like, cool, that's fun. Now what? All right, so the first thing I want to do is this, this probability here. I have it half the time it's doing this, but I want to make that into a little input that I can change. So again, if I have that at 0 and play it, I'm going to take that. So now it's over here. Did I name it something? I did. Probability. Right up here. All right. So if I take my probability, drop it, I can also connect that to the probability of the bass drum. And so now the bass drum and snare are going to have the same knob attachment to it. So if I play it, we have just our basic drum rules. And then if I want, I can have short bursts or just a little bit. All right, so that's going to be a nice, useful one that will connect in a second. I'm going to do one more on these little ghost notes, which is what we call the in-between little tappy notes on the snare. I'm going to do the same with the pitch shift. But if I do it just like that, it's not going to do a crazy amount. And so what I want to do is I'm going to multiply it. Let's try by like 10. All right, so it's going to sound like this. have probably, I'm gonna make it go every time just so you can hear. Nice. All right, I can already picture like the neighbors just being like, what are they doing over there? All right, so we've got two things that we can play around with here. Really quickly, I'm going to go into the actual game scene now and connect that a little bit. Again, let me know if you have any thoughts or questions or, frankly, concerns. I would understand if you had some concerns about this. All right, so I'm going to go over to my game scene. Again, just this first-person scene. You could do things like if I go into my first-person blueprints, the little weapon component is where they have the logic that they have for like picking up the gun and shooting it, which is what I'm going to hijack for some stuff here. I already did one thing here, which is you can see we have this whole logic that they have built in already. Where's the wub base? There definitely needs a wub base in there. Maybe it's like you shoot a certain box and it explodes with the whoop, whoop, whoop. You can see here we have an event for shoot. And events are going to be our kind of best friends when it comes to blueprints and triggering sound effects and all of that kind of stuff. We can have it pop off based on something that happens in the game. Again, a question here if the talk will be archived. It should, the video should be on the AirWiggles event page in its entirety. You can hear me talk about these beautiful drum beats as many times as you want. I have been talking kind of fast with the knowledge that you would be able to go put it at 0.5 speed and pause whenever you need to. All right, so we're going to hijack this event to make it so that when we shoot the gun, something's going to happen. And first, I'm going to do this in the level blueprint for this level, which you click here, open level blueprint. I know a lot of times engineers don't like it a lot when you crowd up the level blueprint with things, but none of them are in this room with me, so I'm just gonna put it here for ease. But you could create your own blueprint and have that interact with other blueprints. But I'm just going to do it in the level blueprint for nice and ease. So first thing we need to do is we need it to do a thing that is going to happen when the game starts. I want it to create the audio component, and I want it to start the drum beat instantly. We're going to add an audio component. And you can see here, over here, I now have this sound spot. What was our thing? It was called Cool Drums. All right, so I've got the Cool Drums Metasound that we created. If I scroll down, I can see there's an auto activate. So that means when the game starts, this should just start. Compile, save, let's see. Nice, all right. I'll try not to groove out too much with the scene, knowing that it's probably laggy and weird. All right, so I'm gonna close that. All right, so we have this, and now I want to create a little variable with this audio component so that I can attach it to a bunch of different things. So what I did there is just drag off this return value, which is the thing that I would connect when it's like, what component do you want to do something with? And I can name it like drum component. And then if you wanted to, you could put it into like a new category. A lot of times I'll do little audio categories. So now over here, you can just collapse that. If you're working with a bigger team that has like a bunch of people using the same blueprint, it's nice to get out of the way as much as possible. You could even create a new graph and just have all the audio stuff in there. Just kind of get out of people's way is usually a good way to let you do whatever you want. If you're just out of their way, you can kind of go for it more. All right, so we have this audio component starting. But I want to do something where every time you shoot, something's going to happen. So I'm going to find that event, input action shoot. All right, so I want to make it so when I shoot, it's going to set that float parameter of this. So I'm going to actually pull off get the component. And then off of here, you can see there's a float parameter that exists. When I tried just without the audio component, I had different options. I could do the little message part here, but if I do it off of the actual audio component itself, it knows that I'm wanting to set a parameter within that. And so I want the one that is, I don't want the parameter control interface, I want the audio component. All right, so I want it to be when I shoot, it's gonna set something. And the thing I want it to set is this probability. Let's rename this to like drum coolness. All right, so drum coolness. I'm gonna copy it, go back here. The drum coolness, I wanna set to like 75%. So when I'm shooting, it should go to 75% on that Metasound. Nice, so you can create this little dynamic scene so that as I'm shooting, everything gets a lot more intense. Realize the frame rate's probably pretty bad on the stream, but hopefully it's not unbearable. All right, so, but right now it just does that forever, which is not what we want. We want it to stop. All right, so to kind of change that, I'm gonna do a thing where I'm just gonna do a simple little delay for like 2 seconds. And I'm gonna copy and paste this. I'm just gonna set that same parameter back down to 0 after 2 seconds of not shooting. It'll go back down. All right, let's see what that's like. All right, nice. Sweet. So just with that, you can kind of see how you can drive these Metasounds input variables to do a bunch of different things. So I could have connected that to like the pitch shift so that as I'm shooting, maybe the volume goes up, or, you know, I could connect it to like the gain over here to make it so that the volume of everything is going up. All right, I'm using a lot of time here, but I don't think we have a hard out since there's not anything really after this. So I might go a little longer just to kind of show you a couple more ways to connect it, since this is really where a lot of the good meat is now just kind of, this is where hopefully you'll start getting the ideas of like, ooh, maybe I could use that to make my bass clarinet start doing the flutter note or something. Maybe I'll shoot and then that'll do that. All right, call that shoot. A lot of times when I'm working in a team also, we'll have like a color for the audio comments just so that I can really quickly see it. So like I might go again like blue. And now in like a field of all of these, I can spot the little blue one. And if you wanted to, you could do little comments like, this happens when you shoot. All right. All right, and that way you can really just make everything readable if you come back to it like a year later and don't know what's happening. Or if someone else is going to be taken over, or if you work in a team or something like that. Make it as easy for everybody as possible. All right, so that was a good example of I do an event in the game triggers this sound, it's changing the variable, it's dynamic, it's cool, it's part of what makes game audio different than like linear media is now I can like, I do something in the game and the music changes and reacts, which is cool. But we also have the option to do it kind of backwards. So traditionally it's this way, but we can also make it so that something happens in the Metasound, which causes something to happen in the scene, which is a cool way to have the Metasound kind of drive the bus. So to do that, I'm gonna make it so when like this bass on 1 hits, we're gonna move one of those cubes. All right, so to do that, I need to create a new output. And I'm gonna call this like kick explosion, because this is going to be the kick explosion. All right, I want this to be a float type instead of the other one, which is like our audio type here. And I can just drag that out And now you see I've got this little kick explosion, which has a float value, so a number value. And I want this audio to do something here. I'm going to do an envelope follower here just to kind of shape that audio into data a little bit easier. And then you could connect it like that. And then if I wanted to, you know, we have the envelope straight to the float here, but you could also do a little conversion audio to float and then, you know, connect it that way, depending on kind of the things you're trying to do. All right, so I've got this little guy here that is now every time this bass on 1 happens, boom, it's going to send it still to the mixer, so we'll hear it, but it's also going to send that value into a little envelope, which is going to convert it to the float, and we'll get like an actual float value, which I can use to make things happen in the scene. And again, we're going to cause a little impulse on the cube, just like if you watched that video at the start, when the big bass happened, drums flew everywhere. I'm going to do something kind of similar to that just to show you, just to get, again, some more wheels spinning. All right, so to do that, I'm going to go back into the blueprint. I'm going to get it's called down at the bottom. Yeah, get Metasound output subsystem. So this is getting the output subsystem within that Metasound. And I want to, what's the name of it? Watch output, that's what it is. So many notes, so little time. All right, so I want to watch one of the specific outputs. So I could theoretically have a different output on every single one of those drums. But for this one, I want to watch the kick explosion. I always find it's easiest just to come over here, copy it and paste it. Take out as much human error as possible. All right, nice. So I've got this little guy going here. I'm going to connect it to the same chain here. In fact, I'll even just make it the same audio component. So now when the game starts, it'll start watching that output instantly. All right, now if I compile, you'll see I get an error. And that's because it says the current value of on output value changed depend is valid, because I need to create some kind of event for something to happen. And so I'm just going to add a custom event, kick explosion. Won't put that. All right, so I've got a kick explosion. And then from here, I'm going to connect. I want to get the float of the Metasound output. Excuse me. All right, so now I want it to change that cube. Let's just go with this nice cube right here. So if I select it and I have it highlighted and I go back into my blueprint and right click, you can see I've got a bunch of extra stuff that I can do now that I have that static mesh actor selected. That's the cube right there. I just want to create a reference to it so that it knows exactly what I'm doing with that. And so I'm going to say add impulse. We'll add an impulse at the location of that cube whenever that happens. The location I'm going to use is going to be the get actor location of self. You can say self, or you can also just like connect it in depending on how you want it to look. All right, so now it's going to do kick explosion happens based on 1. It's going to get that float value and it's going to send it into a little impulse here. I'm going to split this up because I just want it to happen on the upwards guy here. I'm going to multiply it because I know this can be, the value can sometimes be pretty small. So I want it to be the value of the float is going to be multiplied by like, let's go something like 20,000. And then that is going to go to the Z, which should kick it up in the air, theoretically. Let's see if that worked. Oh, it's so cute. All right, so not enough. 40,000. Did I do 40,000 or 400? I did 400. Nice. All right, so you can see it's changing. It's just doing a very cute little. I definitely see you connecting all of the different drums to like these little critters or something and having a very, very adorable scene. Or you can do, you can change the transform in different ways. So instead of like just making it jump up, you can maybe make it do like a little squish every beat by setting it to something like the scale, like one of the values of the scale, like the Y or something. So there's lots of endless amounts of little things you can do. In the past, I've connected that exact same logic to things like, if I pull off of this, I might like be able to like set material of the static mesh component. Like maybe whenever that bass happens, it suddenly changes to a different material like rock or stone or, you know, something. If you have like lighting or something like that, like if I had, for example, the directional light selected, I could go in here and create reference to directional light. I think they have like a set light color. So I could theoretically connect that event to also set the light color to, let's say like blue. I'm using a lot of blue today. And so now if I do it, it might look weird. We've got it to be blue. Nice. You could do something where you like do that twice and then connect it to like a toggle. What's it called? Maybe not a toggle. I can't remember the name of it, but the one that just, flip-flop. Yeah, you could connect it from there into a flip-flop. So the first time, maybe it turns it blue, and the second time it turns it like red. I can already tell this is going to do something kind of funky because this value that's happening from this float isn't just like a quick like one and done. It's that bass has like a boo tail to it. And so it's going to send input into that the entire time. And so now when I press play, it's probably going to be kind of flipping back and forth every time it sends a new input. So this is a warning for flashing lights, just in case anyone has any kind of flashing light issue. Warning, warning. All right, let's see what it looks like. All right, so you can see it's triggering every time it gets some kind of value. So you could kind of mess around with that by like maybe making the release a lot faster or the attack a lot shorter to get more precision. I've done it before where I swap out this and just have a listener that's doing like something really short and sharp, like a kind of thing, or like a metronome click. So you can do that. And yeah, that's a fun way to do it. All right, so another way, I'm gonna do one super quick one. I'm gonna speed run this because it's already past time, but this is a fun one that I like to do. I'm gonna do a thing for jump here, that when you trigger the jump, again, I need to pull in my audio component, I want to set the float parameter of, I've got all these names I got to remember, of drum coolness to 1. So full drum coolness. So I'm going to jump and it's going to go to for everything. But I want to do it over. I'm going to add another one. Sorry. I'm going to copy and paste this because I want to change the pitch for this one, which was my pitch shift. Pitch shift. All right, so I want to change the pitch up to that high value as well, but I'm going to do it over the course of a period of time. And so to do that, I'm going to use a timeline. I'm going to connect that to the play from the start because I want it to do every time I jump, it's going to restart this. If I double click this, I can get a new timeline track where I can add a new float track. Let's make this over the course of 0.3 seconds, something really short. And I'm going to add a couple of little curves. So the first one is going to be at 0 seconds. It's going to be at 0. And the second one is going to be at the 0.3 seconds. It's going to be at 1. All right, then, if I go back to the event graph. All right, so now when I jump, it's going to have 0.3 of a second, and the pitch is going to go on that. But I wanted to also finish that and then go back down. Let's maybe see if I can do that from completed here. And so now I want to do a timeline to make it. I'm just going to do the same thing backwards. 0.3 key. Again, I'm going really fast, so hopefully you can just kind of get slightly inspired by this and then pause and re-look at it, whatever we want. So at 0, I want it to be at full. And then at 0.3, back down to 0. Compile, save, go back here. And then I'm going to connect that. One thing I realized, I didn't change the value here. So I need to connect that value that I created in the timeline to the float to make it actually do the thing. All right, so I want to do, actually, no, I want that update. You're right. All right, connect that, connect that. And then I'm also going to do this thing backwards, connect that, make that back down to 0. All right, so now whenever I jump, assuming I did that right, it will, oh, let me disconnect that so I don't hurt anyone's eyes here and or be overly annoying. So if I jump, nice. All right, let's hear everything in its glory. All right. Nice. All right, I'm seeing you can reverse from the end of that. Very likely. I'm definitely a timeline noob here, but yeah, a little reverse from it. All right, so yeah, you can definitely optimize this a little bit. One thing that I've definitely really enjoy about Metasounds and Unreal and Blueprints is, yeah, you constantly find little tweaks to things. You're like, this is working great. And then someone's like, yeah, but you can just click this one box and you don't need any of that code. But at the same time, if you get it working and it is doing what you're intending to, you'll have that nice warm feeling. And then, yeah, definitely try to learn and optimize. So thank you for letting me know that exists. All right, I'm going to stop sharing here. Awesome. All right, so we had a lot of crazy drum grooving going on. Hopefully got the wheels turning a little bit. You could also attach things like I was showing earlier with the camera shake, the lights changing. You could do a rhythm game where maybe your gun only shoots whenever there's like snare input or something, or the enemies shoot whenever there's a bass drum or something. You can have all kinds of craziness, and using it for like your Implementournament projects. Definitely try to think of some interesting ways. There's going to be just like a big surge of people adding drum beats to their Implementournament project after this, and like, what happened on September 18th? What's going on? Awesome. All right, so let's see if anyone left any questions or anything like that. All right, we got any tips or resources to keep learning and practicing these skills? In my case, I'm pretty much a beginner on Metasounds, but from what I saw today, it seems very understandable. Yeah, that is a great question and great point. I definitely learned a lot of this just by coming in with a concept of what I wanted to do and then trying to see if it was possible and how I would have to get there and kind of experimenting. But there are a lot of really helpful tutorials out there on YouTube. Let me see my favorite one. I found the, excuse me, what's his name? Brian Michael Fuller on YouTube, great guy, has a ton of really awesome tutorials, just kind of breaking down different audio things in a little more bite-sized than me just grooving at you for an hour. So he's got some really good ones. There's the sound effects guy, has a lot of really great information on YouTube. I learned a lot from him. He's got a thing where he breaks down just nodes. And so a lot of times I would just like watch a video on a breakdown of a node and then kind of brainstorm just different things I could potentially do with that node. And then whenever I had a chance to sit down at the engine again, I would kind of, just experiment. Just like all things, experimenting is really where you discover everything. For the blueprint side, that is a different question. That one's definitely a less intuitive part for my my musician background brain. And so to get into that, definitely was a lot of tutorials and a lot of the documentation as much as I could kind of follow along with that. There's some good Udemy courses that are very inexpensive that you can get going for like $10 to $15 a lot of times. You can really get a lot of interesting projects just from Udemy in general. They have a lot of blueprint projects where they will do like a game from scratch. And a lot of times I approach those with like I'm going to learn how to do it, but I'm also going to think of like how I can like integrate my audio experiments within that. And then a lot of times I'll post that kind of stuff on my YouTube channel. All right, let's see what else here. Sound effects guy, yeah, I've got a nice shout out to that. All right. Awesome. Seems like that is kind of it on the questions. But I'm available for anyone to reach out to, either here on AirWiggles. I'm most active on also Instagram at Jared Farney Audio, and then my YouTube channel, Jared Farney Audio. Feel free to just reach out and let's just talk and become friends. I need to become friends with everybody here. All right, so have a great rest of your implement tournament, and I will hopefully see you guys soon.